Hi, I am SD sir, and today I'll teach you respiration. I'll teach you all the anatomy and physiology of respiration. Respiration. What is respiration? Respiration is because why do we respire? Why? The reason because we need oxygen and we need to breathe out carbon dioxide which is produced by your body. So we need to absorb oxygen. This oxygen we need to absorb it and we have to take out or breathe out or to say we have to release this carbon dioxide from our body. So that is the preliminary necessity that we have to do, and as we know we produce huge amount of carbon dioxide and we need to consume oxygen. So these are the two things that our body requires, means we need to consume oxygen and we need to breathe out carbon dioxide. For these two things we respire. So how does we deliver this oxygen to our body, and how that what our body produces carbon dioxide, our body produces huge amount of carbon dioxide, how that this gas escapes into the escapes from our body. So why are we learning this topic respiration in physiology? Because we need to know that how our body consumes this oxygen. It's a bit of a complex process that our body consumes oxygen, and the release of the carbon dioxide, that is also a little bit complex process, how it is released. But preliminary we will focus on the organ of respiration, and the organ of respiration is lung. And what is lung is present in our inside our rib cage, in our thoracic cavity. It is present inside the rib cage, inside the thoracic cavity, in our in the upper part of the torso, in our torso. And this lung is what is it's a kind of balloon. It's a kind of balloon which inflates and deflates, deflates. And what is the speciality about this balloon? That this balloon goes on and continues to get inflated and deflated throughout our life. And it's made up of human tissues. It's made up of stretchable elastic fibers, and that is a result that it inflates and deflates throughout our life, and by that way we take in atmospheric air while it inflates, and while it deflates we breathe out carbon dioxide. So it's a very musical as well as a very rhythmic process that goes on. And this inflation of our lung, it's actually very important. And how do we do that? We do that by our respiratory muscles. Your respiratory muscles. And what are those respiratory muscles? The muscles in between our rib cage. Say this is our rib. From the back, in the back it is attached at the spine, and in the front it is attached to the sternum, a bone called sternum. And so these ribs run along this and gets attached to the front part of our body, and this is the sternum, the center of our rib cage. And these ribs from both the sides, from the right side and from the left side, they gets attached to the sternum. Likewise, and inside this rib cage we have the lungs. You have the lungs here inside this rib cage. So I'll rub this little bit diagram what I have drawn now here. So I'll put you a nice picture of this. So this is from a book called Byrne and Levy, and I'll show you here. The diagram is a very nice one to describe. And you find the ribs here. You find these ribs here. These are the ribs, and these ribs run from the back to the front of our body, and here is the sternum, where it is attached. Now these are the fixed ribs, and these are the floating ribs. There are a few ribs, the ribs that are below, closer to the abdomen. These are the floating ribs. These ribs float means they don't get attached to the while they come to the front, they don't get attached to the sternum, the lower ribs. and these are the intercostal muscles, means in the between the ribs, intercostal, between two costa, the muscles you find are intercostal muscles. So there are two types of intercostal muscles, internal intercostal muscles and external intercostal muscles. So these are the here it is written external intercostal muscles. External intercostal muscles, say these are the external intercostal muscles. And there is another thing which is called diaphragm. Here the dot line denotes the placement of the diaphragm. These are the major muscles of inspiration, as well as there are the abdominal muscles. These abdominal muscles here, in the abdomen, which where we tell that our abs are present. The abdominal muscles, they are also muscles for inspiration. Why these muscles are for inspiration? Because while we inspire, actually we increase the volume of our rib cage. While we inspire, we increase the volume of our rib cage, and so a negative kind of pressure, and negative pressure builds inside this rib cage. A negative pressure, because this negative, what is negative pressure? Negative in respect to atmospheric pressure. And while there is a negative zone of air, we know that whenever a negative zone of air is built up, actually the air fills in. So while we create a negative pressure inside this volume, inside this rib cage volume, inside our lung, while we create this negative pressure, the air actually gets sucked in. It gets sucked in throughout by our mouth, by our nostrils, and it gets poured into, and it fills the negative zone. It fills the negative pressure zone. So actually, it's a kind of suction that we develop while we respire, while we inspire, because all these muscles actually build up a negative pressure. It increases the volume. And so the same air is there and the volume is increased. So with the same air that is there inside the rib cage, and then with the muscles of our respiration, with these abdominal muscles getting down and the rib cage is getting up, and the whole volume gets the whole expands, and so a kind of negative pressure builds in, and air sucks in through our nostrils and through our mouth. And so this type of respiration, what we is called active respiration. Here it is mentioned, it's called active respiration. I'll tell you that there are two types of respiration. One is negative pressure breathing, that I have just told you, negative pressure breathing. And the other one is positive pressure breathing. Positive pressure breathing. Now the one that I just described now is negative pressure breathing. Why is negative pressure breathing? Because we are creating a negative pressure inside the lungs, inside our thoracic cage, and that is because we contract all our muscles, and all these muscles increases the thoracic volume, and because the volume gets increased, the pressure gets lowered, and so a negative zone is created and air gets sucked in, and this is called negative pressure breathing. What is positive pressure breathing? When you swallow kind of thing, when you swallow some air, and when we inflate a balloon. When we inflate a balloon, say you just put in forcefully, you pour in air inside the balloon. So that is a kind of breathing which we do while we actively respire, and that is positive pressure. That is, we create a positive pressure. But while we so few animals always breathe have a positive pressure breathing, but as humans we generally do not. We always have a negative pressure breathing kind of breathing technique, and this will I'll explain it with you later on, why we all the intricacies and all the details about this negative pressure breathing. And now I'll go a little bit towards the muscles of inspiration and expiration, and all about the details of the other details of respiration. So how much our next question is, how much of air do we actually put inside? How much of air is actually put inside a respiratory cycle? How much of air? How much of air? Say we breathe in and breathe out very quietly, very quietly. We actually breathe unconsciously, completely unconscious, while we read a book, while we watch TV, we eat food throughout the day. We actually breathe very unconsciously, and this unconsciousness is actually very required because our respiratory centers are present in the medulla, our unconscious brain. And this unconsciousness is actually a physical is actually a physiological property. And while we unconsciously breathe, and we can breathe heavily unconsciously also. Say we run, when we run, we also are breathing very heavily. So we are doing an exercise, we are climbing down, we are climbing up a stairs, so we all, during that time also, we are breathing heavily and yet unconsciously. So at times also we get to know how much we are breathing, and that is conscious breathing. So both happens, means we can consciously breathe as well as unconsciously breathe. So this is about a little bit neurophysiology, about respiration, a little bit of involvement of our brain. And now I'll go to a little details about the volumes of air and how much of air, how much of respiration, and those things. So coming to the question, how much of air do we breathe in actually every time we are sitting, we are at rest. So how much of air do we breathe in at rest? At rest, we actually breathe in around 500 ml of air, and this is called tidal volume. And you will be very this just half a liter of air, half a liter of a Coca-Cola can, or that we put inside, within every breathing cycle, and this air is called tidal volume. And then we can ask the question that if this amount of air is enough for our body. Yes, it is enough. And this amount of air that we pour inside our body, every minute we pour inside our body, this amount of air, we pour it 12 to 15 times a minute. So it will be, if it is half a liter 12 times, so it will be 6 liters. If it is half a liter 15 times, it will be 7.5 liters. So this is this amount of air we put inside our body every minute while we are at rest. But while we are at work, say we are walking or we are jogging or we are doing some household work, then this volume of air will increase. And how much it will increase? The volume of air will increase, but how much will it increase depends on the amount of work that you are doing. So if it is a very heavy work, then it can go up very high. If it's a moderate work, it can be in the mid zone, and it's a very light work, it will rise above 6 liters and 7.5 liters. It will rise above, say, above 10 liters, 11 liters, 12 liters in light work. So how does this rise? There are two things about this rise. One is the volume thing, and the other is the rate. So volume times the rate, volume into rate, the volume of air that we breathe every time into the rate gives you actually the total volume you breathe. The total volume you breathe in a particular time, say in a minute or like that. So if I say that how much we respire in a minute, so it will be, at rest you respire, the minute ventilation is around 6 liters to 7.5 liters at rest. It's a minute ventilation. Means we respire this in a minute. So how much it can go up? It can go up by say 40 liters, by say 70 liters. So how does that go up? See, if the volume can be increased as well as the time, as well as the rate, so it can go up. Say volume increases by by a factor which is x, and y rate increases by a factor which is y, so it can go up to a huge amount. It can go up to a huge amount. So volume it can we can increase this volume say 10 times, and we can increase the rate say from 12 to say 24 times. So by 12 to 20, so it can grow 20 times, 10 into 2, 20 times. So if it is 24 times per minute, and so it can, the rate goes to into 24 times per minute, and the volume goes 10 times more. So it can go up to 10 into 2, 20 times. Say, I'll give you an example. Say if we are breathing in a volume of say 4 liters, 4 liters with every breathing cycle, with every cycle. So and you are anywhere with a rate of say 30 respiratory cycles per minute. So it can go up to 120 liters. 4 into 30, 120 liters. So this is a huge amount of air that you are pouring in. Actually, we are ventilating inside the lung. And why do we require this huge amount of respiration? Just not only to because that we need oxygen and take out carbon dioxide, but there is a very preliminary other needs, very preliminary needs of our body. We need to we cool down our body by respiring. We cool down because it's a huge source of cooling down. Lung has a huge surface area, and this surface area, from this huge surface area, water vapor evaporates, and by respiring we can lose this water vapor and have a huge cooling down effect on the of our body. So actually dogs pant, that we see, and any animals during heavy weather, during hot summers, they pant, and they actually lose their body temperature by panting. And this is a very important part also, apart from oxygen consumption and carbon dioxide removal of our body through respiration. And now I'll go to the details of about this volume and this rate kind of thing. And while I go to the details, I'll have to draw a few curves and I'll explain you those curves. So up to now, what is clear is that we are taking in 500 ml of air and breathing out 500 ml of air, and taking in 500 ml of air and breathing out 500 ml of air. So if this is a wave, if I depict it by this wave, so this part is the inspiratory part and this part is the expiratory part. So inspiratory part and expiratory part. So we are, and this is the volume, and this axis is the volume. So this amount is say 500 ml. This amount is 500 ml, and this is time. So we are completing this 500 ml of air in 1 minute. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 times say we are breathing. Every time 500 ml. So this goes on every, and we actually what is by this help of this waves, we have just drawn that we have the depth of respiration is 500 ml. This is 500 ml, and by this x-axis, in this x-axis we have seen that there is the time, and with 1 minute going, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 breaths. So it's 12 into 5, that is 12 into 500 ml actually. 12 into 500 ml, that is actually 6 liters. 6000 ml or 6 liters. So this is actually our resting minute ventilation. So likewise, if I denote this thing, and we go on to learn what are the different volumes, how much we can expand our lung. So in that way we will there will be a few, there must be a few questions that if I ventilate our lung to 500 ml, then is it this much, is it the maximum? Is it this maximum? No, 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 at all not. So we can put in air much more than this 500 ml, and this is the amount of air that we can put inside our lung at our best efforts, during our best efforts, is much more than 500 ml. And those efforts, when we give, those are the huge inspiratory efforts, and by putting in those efforts, we actually breathe a lot of amount of air every cycle. We can breathe a lot amount of air every cycle, and that is called the inspiratory reserve capacity. Inspiratory reserve capacity, or the inspiratory reserve volume. Say if this is the 500 ml of air that we are putting inside every day, every time, and we at this point of time, I decide that I'll see how much of this inspiratory reserve volume is there, and I'm putting in more air inside our body, and this is the amount of air that with a maximal inspiratory effort, this is the amount of air that we are. So this volume is around 3.5 liters. Inspiratory reserve volume. This volume is around 3.5 liters. Around with this 500 ml, it goes up to 4 liters. That means above this basal level, this is the basal level which we tell by a term where it's called FRC, functional residual capacity, functional residual capacity is this baseline from where we start our breathing cycle. This is an inspiration, and this is an expiration. This is an inspiration, this is an expiration. This is an inspiration and expiration, inspiration, expiration, inspiration, expiration, and this is another inspiration with a much larger effort, than this one. This is also an inspiration, this is one expiration, a forceful expiration. So, and every time if we get back here, and we call this as functional residual capacity, and we can also, with a maximal expiratory effort, we can also go back much lower than this, and this amount of air that we can forcefully. So if it is the basic, if this is the basal line, if this is the basal line that we are returning to by every silent breathing, we can also eject out more air by an expiratory breath, and this amount of air is called expiratory reserve volume. It's much like the same like inspiratory reserve volume. This is inspiratory reserve volume, IRV. This is expiratory reserve volume, ERV. And how much is this? This is around 1 liter. So this inspiratory reserve volume plus this 500 ml, that means 4 liters, plus this 1 liter to 1.2 liters. This 1.2 liters of expiratory reserve volume, it comes to 5 liters, and there will some amount of air that will be still left inside this lung after this forced expiratory effort. There will be some amount of air that will be remaining in the lung, and that is called residual volume. So unless and until you cut this or puncture the lung or cut through our rib cage, you can't take out this amount of air. This amount of air will be there inside the lungs, even if you have put on a highest deflation effort. This amount of air will not be. You cannot put out this amount of air. It cannot just breathe out this amount of air. So it is residual. It will be always residual inside the lung, and this residual volume is 1 liter. Is around 1 liter. So this is the amount of, and I'll go to some point. One point. The first point is, this is the amount. This from this dotted line to this dotted line. This is the amount. This total is the amount of air that is actually exchangeable. Means from a basal expiration and inspiration cycle, you can go up this up to this much it is around 3.5 liters. And you can, from this respiratory cycle, you can go below 1 liter plus this 500 ml of air, this 3.5 liters of air that you can have we have as an inspiratory reserve volume, this amount of air, this volume of air, this is the inspiratory reserve volume, plus this 500 ml of air, plus this 1 liter of air, 1 liter of air expiratory reserve volume. This is the exchangeable air. And because these three volumes, this 1, this 2 and this 3 volume, because these are the actual important exchangeable air, so these 3 volumes taken together, we call it vital capacity, vital capacity of the lungs. So how do you measure vital capacity? Actually, it is, if we take in a huge amount of air that we can take in, the highest amount of air that we can take in, say this is this. So after taking in the highest amount of air, if we inflate our lung to the highest point, then we start deflating forcefully. We start deflating the lung forcefully. Then first this amount of air will go out, then the tidal volume will go out, and then this expiratory reserve volume will go out. So after a forceful inspiration, a forceful expiration will leave all the air, and it will be a measure of your vital capacity from here to here, which is around 5 liters, 3.5 liters plus 5.5 liters plus 1 liter, 3.5 plus 0.5 plus 1 liter, which is actually 5 liters. This is this amount of air is actually exchangeable. It is exchangeable means we can if we want, we can put in that this amount of air inside our lung at our will, and if we want, in a single breath we can put out this air from our lung in a single breath, and so it is called vital capacity. So with this respiration, with this air breathing in and breathing out, what we do is that we take in oxygen, and while we expire out air, we expire out the carbon dioxide from our body, from our body, as well as we liberate a little amount of heat also, because the air that comes out from our body is actually hot. It contains carbon dioxide. We lose water because the air that goes inside the lung gets moistened by water vapor. And at 37-degree temperature of our body that we have, at that temperature, what happens is that the water evaporates and it saturates the air. At 37-degree, that saturation amount gives you a partial pressure of water vapor of around 47 millimeter of mercury, and that 47 millimeter of mercury water vapor pressure is there inside in the expired air. And this air that we that goes out actually is compositionally different. The air that we take in is atmospheric air. It contains 20 to 21% of oxygen and say 0.03% carbon dioxide, and nitrogen, we know that it is around 879 to 80% is of our air is nitrogen. So this is the inspired air, or the atmospheric air. Now while we breathe out air during expiration, the inspired air contains 20% oxygen. The expired air contains around 14% oxygen. So 6% means 6% of oxygen is absorbed, and this 6% is replaced by carbon dioxide from our body. This 6% is replaced by carbon dioxide from our body. And so while we absorb oxygen, we also liberate the same amount of actually with every breathing cycle we take in 500 ml of air, and we breathe out 500 ml of air. So both of that happens. We take in 500 ml of air and we breathe out 500 ml of air. So actually there is an exchange that happens. 20 our atmospheric air, or the inspired air, or the ambient air, that contains 20% oxygen, and the air that goes out contains 14% oxygen. The nitrogen is not used in our body, so it gets inside our body and gets liberated as well. It is not used, so it is not absorbed in our body. Little bit whatever nitrogen is absorbed, it is not absorbed actively. So this nitrogen gets liberated from our in our expired air. As it gets in, it gets out. It has an equilibrium with our body, and with that equilibrium, it stays to some extent in our body. It stays it stays dissolved to some extent. Nitrogen stays dissolved to some extent in our body. It has a separate equilibrium. It is not used. It's not a gas that we use or we create in our body. We don't create any amount of nitrogen inside our body so that the nitrogen level goes up in expired air. We do not do that. So nitrogen remains as it is, and the oxygen that is getting used up is a result that expired air contains from 20%, the expired air loses oxygen and it becomes 14%, means 100 ml of 20% means 100 ml of oxygen, which was carrying say 20 ml of oxygen, is now carrying 14 ml of oxygen in the expired air, and carbon dioxide is now 6%. And an additional thing that I've just told you, the air is humidified, so expired air contains water vapor, and water vapor and it significantly takes part in it has a the humidified air, you can use that air to wipe our glass, and we can know that the water vapor that comes out of our body gets condensed on the glass. So we have an estimate of that water vapor, the expired air contains a huge amount of water vapor, and this water vapor is because at 37-degree temperature, the air that we take in actually gets saturated with water vapor. As a 37-degree temperature for our body gets saturated with water vapor, and this water vapor goes out. Now I'll go. This was the part of that gas mixture, or the preliminary part of the gas mixtures that we take in and take out, and the percentages.